This is the Milo Sweet Podcast, where you'll learn to get unstuck. Start now. Conquer life's challenges by learning to do difficult. Find quick and clever ways to overcome. Wait, did you think life was going to be easy? Remember, all of your excuses are now dead to me. Let's get started.
Guess what time it is? It's time for you to hit the subscribe button and find just 1% that you think will benefit from this. But if you're feeling a little generous, right? Or you're super free with your time right now, probably doing nothing because you're listening to this. Well, maybe if you're doing something, actually just make yourself free right now. Hit subscribe. What are you waiting for? Hit it. Come on. Hit subscribe.
Welcome to the show, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's hear a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Samantha. I live in Portland. I am currently a spin instructor at a local Portland studio. And yeah, fitness enthusiast and someone who's just taken a lot of interest in learning and growing. So I'm excited to be here.
Welcome. Okay, so we're going to get into talking about habits. First off, how would you even how does someone even categorize habit? How do you even determine what's a habit and what's not one?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just listening to a podcast and they were talking about that, but I kind of feel like it's something that is, I don't even know if it's on autopilot, but that you have to think less about to do, kind of like a routine. But I think, yeah.
Yes. So it's more like a default.
Yes. But I actually don't think it always has to be that, because I don't think it has to be necessarily like a default, but maybe like an activity that you do consistently.
So that's the baseline. I think that's important to differentiate, because there's some things that we may feel are a habit that are not. When we, reflection, I think, is very important when looking at your habits. So I think that's just a good baseline, and it's not a blanket statement, but it's a good baseline to say, is this a habit or not? So you read Atomic Habits, you're interested in learning and growing. How does one evaluate which habits to create?
Yeah, so that was one of the interesting ones for me, because I feel like I'm someone who likes to set a lot of goals, but then figuring out the actual follow through to create a process, I think is more important, essentially. But I think kind of defining your values and who you want to be, because the why is always going to be so much more important than the outcome. Because honestly, it's really hard to get to the outcome if you're not really clear on why you're doing it in the first place.
I think that's super duper important. One of another podcast interview I had mentioned, we talked about how I read so much. And I think really why, and this is a deep foundational principle for me, is that when I became a parent, I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. And that scared me. And I was very aware of that. And from learning, I understood that learning, applying, reflecting was the process I needed to set in place to be able to be a good parent. And that has filled me in so many, that principle works in so many other categories. But I feel like that's the first time I was really aware of how my goal to learning or reading was connected to another outcome in my life. I have always been doing that in my life, but sometimes we do things like you said that, you're kind of not aware of them. You're just doing them.
I was just actually learning about how much of our thought process is unconscious or subconscious. So it's over 90% of the things that we do are subconscious. So you said, reflecting on why we do. I know that's an astounding percentage, crazy. But which is why it's so important to evaluate even just asking, getting curious on why you do certain things. But I think it's really interesting that you said that, because your motivation to be a good parent was so important to you. that learning all this stuff and all the things that you do is motivating enough for you to like continue to stick with it.
That's actually even why I would love to tell you that I'm bold enough to do things on my own without my kids. But, each step I take in life, I realize, what am I what am I doing as a mentor? What kind of imaging am I giving them? I tell them to do things afraid and, to tackle their fears and be comfortable with the uncomfortable. But I was super comfortable in suburbia, and it's super convenient. You can set up your life to be super convenient. And once I realized that I wasn't really imaging what I was doing, that connection, it's 10 years later, my oldest will be 11 this year. It's still working for me. It, like you said, it's 90%. It's an autopilot thing where I'm just thinking, how can I be better for you? How can I offer more? How can I give you more opportunities, and how can I be the person that I'm telling you to be? I probably, I'm giving my kids a head start, so I think they're going to be better than me. I'm totally fine with that, but I don't want to give them an excuse for not showing up, right? And I was using that. So that's really interesting. I didn't know it was 90%. I'm kind of freaking out right now. I'm like, dang, how much is really happening from my subconscious? So you said that you started with values. How do you even, I feel like that's just an ambiguous statement. How do you even start to understand what you value?
Sitting down first and just thinking about the things that are most important to you are, people always are like, you want to be a certain way, but a lot of people don't sit down to actually define what and who they want to be, which is kind of going to be your North Star, and the things that you want to accomplish. So I always just have found the importance more and more on sitting down to reflect and actually taking time to write this stuff down. And I've taken workshops where you actually have to sit down and write your values. There's just no other way around it. You need to sit down and you need to think about it. And they even I took a Brene Brown course on Dare to Lead. Yeah. In that course, they had us come up with 2 core values, and that these 2 core values kind of supersede. They're kind of your decision making for all things. When you come up to a fork in the road, there's 2. She was saying that anything beyond that, there's always 2, and you probably have things that are falling underneath those things. But at the end of the day, these 2 core values, and hers were courage and courage and faith, I think, were hers. I'm sure you can look it up on what hers were, but she basically was those were her 2 guiding values. So when she came into hard decisions, kind of how you're talking about things you need to do and what you want to do versus what you should do, she had those 2 things to guide her and help her kind of create some habits and things that she wanted to accomplish. But basically it forced me to sit down and actually think about it.
There's 2 questions in my head right now, and I don't know which one to choose. So I'm going to ask you both, and you can take your time to answer them. How do you set your values up when you're scared? I feel I love to tackle things, but I feel a huge amount of fear sometimes knowing about what really is versus what I think it is, right? How do you set that up? And then the second question, which I'm happy to re-ask, is what are your 2 core values?
Yeah. So with the first question that you asked around kind of how do you proceed when you're experiencing fear, and the biggest thing that I have learned is to kind of equip yourself with tools. I just think the mind has some crazy power, for the good and for the bad, to create these scenarios and make things far worse than they were. And you hear about with people with stage fright or just things that cause us a lot of anxiety or fear, but getting tools to break it down to really realize when our bodies go into these states of fear. I've heard that it's you're almost in this state of survival. You're not thinking clearly necessarily. So there's grounding techniques and just different things to say okay, hold on, I'm not under attack by a lion at this moment. I need to breathe for a second and objectively look at the scenario and what's the worst that can happen, and break it down and not just let it be when your mind's in a state of emergency. So basically, to answer the question, it's to get tools that help you kind of step back to like see the scenario for what it is. But then those guiding values, I think, are going to be so important when you are just confronted what you know you should do versus what you want to do, to help lead you. Does that answer?
That sounds, yeah, that's beautiful. Absolutely. And I think sometimes we don't even have labels or even know we need tools. I know when I went into adulthood, I didn't have a toolkit. I was like, oh, people have tools? What's in my toolkit? Nothing. I need to build a house? Okay, I don't have any supplies. So I think just using those terms, even loosely, to say, hey, what's in your mental toolkit? I think people don't even think about that. And when I was faced with the huge hurdle of just saying, oh gosh, how do I be married and how do I be a mom? I mean, I don't know everyone's, experience as being, a parent or marriage, but for me, a lifetime seems like a huge deal. So I was like, whoa, I just made, I said I would do this forever. I don't even know what I'm doing. So, and then it was like, whoa, okay, the only way I leave my kid is by death. Okay, these are two things that they're not going anywhere, and I better do a good job for it, with it. And so that was really evident for me, but I had no idea where to turn. I didn't see anyone else asking it. All my friends were like, I love you guys, but you were pretty much knuckleheads. I was like 21, married, and like 22, 23 with a kid. So none of my friends were in that stage in their life. They were basically just having a whole lot of fun in different areas. So I felt very like alone. And I think that is a great way to start, to say what's in your toolkit, what tools should be in there. You want to tackle building, and this in your mind, what do you need to do that? Very great metaphor. Now, I just want to know what's in your mind and what you value. So what are your two core values?
I've determined to kind of be my guiding light is faith for me, as a believer, but also just like the way that I interpret it just in general is that like I have everything I need to get through this moment. And so whether that's not necessarily through my own strength, but like those around me, the people that have been placed in my life, that this moment is not going to break me, and that I have faith that like things will work out and things will get better. And so just like you can never lose hope. So I think like that is a foundation for me, that I work on, but also just like have that as my guiding light. And then the next one is to make a difference. I put a lot of things through that filter on whether or not like, can I serve in this area? Can I make it better? Like it would be one of my biggest joys to leave this earth and make it better than it was before I came through it. So those are the two things that I always consider.
I want to do it now. I think because I'm in a different stage in life, and I feel like I want to go through the lens of double checking, just like, hey, you know what, is this really true to my core? Or maybe like you said, there's a lot of different words and there's a lot of different lenses, and maybe that's a core value under that core value, but not the main thing. So before your conversation, or you told me your values, I was going to say autonomy and excellence. And now, I'm not really sure, because I do feel like when you said faith, I'm like, I always feel I'm very clear on the negative, but I'm also very, very clear that there's a way to overcome that. So I feel very relentless in that perspective. But I love, for excellence, I just love to do a lot of things well, like really well. When I apply myself to something, I want to do a really good job, not compared to other people, but to just myself, right? And then for autonomy, I love just being able, I love to feel free in all aspects of my life, meaning I might know the best avenue for myself, but also I want the freedom to be curious, to learn, to grow and develop. And I find that is super helpful for me to tackle, the long-term goals or challenges that you have in, family, because really family is full of problems that you have to solve. And I think if you really want a good family, or even just good relationships, it doesn't have to be family. It can be friends, is that you have to work through those problems. And I can't say, you know, as you get more tools, like you mentioned, you get more keen on how to overcome those communication hurdles and how to build that team, whether that's at work or that's at school or with friends, family. I think it's really important. And I really love the word tool. I know that's a common word, but it's really resonating with me that it really is about just adding different things into your toolkit to help you. So we got our values. We're encouraging other people to have theirs. Where do you
have your values, and then, like I said, like we talked about habits and kind of creating them. And I think taking a step back to observe and see kind of where the biggest thing, again, for me with like the whole habit situation has been around like identifying which habits I really want to implement, identifying why, so that they even stand a chance. Because if you don't stand, I mean, let's be honest, if you choose the wrong why and it's not convicting, it's really, really challenging to make it stick. And then putting a process in place that's going to help you to be more successful. Which I was just like kind of laughing about, like different things that I've had since reading a book, Atomic Habits, around like I wanted to have like a better nighttime and morning facial regimen. So like I actually like built a shelf that's in my bathroom now that has all those like whatever serum and cleanser that I want to like use, because like if it's not on the counter, and I don't like having a lot of clutter on the counter. So I was like, if I didn't have it in an easy spot for me to grab, I would just skip it. So basically it's just making it more convenient. And I was just listening to a podcast around habits again, in the sense of it's so fascinating how like we want to eat healthy, but it's eating healthy has a long-term positive effect, but in the immediate moment, not really. And then versus like eating really bad, it has like a really immediate like reward, but in the long term it's not. And I was just thinking, like, how ironic is this? Like, why can't the thing that is the easy thing be the thing that's like the good thing for us? It's just like more likely than not the case, unfortunately. But his whole talk was again on just convenience, like creating a process that makes what you want to be the easiest option. So in like the last episode, we talked about like eating healthy, and I was like, well, I don't actually have very much crappy food in my house because I will eat it. And so like when I go to the fridge, the easiest option is all I have, which is like carrots or something to snack on. So like for me, I would have to go into my car and drive to the store to go get some like food that would be bad for me to eat, which makes it really more inconvenient than just either like not snacking at that moment and drinking water, or having healthy snacks.
I think that actually this is a point that we can apply to things outside of health. I think health is super easy for a lot of people to resonate with, purely for vanity's sake. But you know, like that's where we secretly start. But it does feel good long term, right? And it's super connected to your willpower, your ability to stick to something, just as a different segment or a conversation for another day. But it does translate into parenting. It translates into work, figuring out ways to make doing that habit more convenient for you. So it's like assessing, like you said, from your values, and then saying, okay, I want to eat healthy, but at work, they always have burgers. How can I make it inconvenient to eat that burger and more convenient? And also maybe there is a reward for yourself, whether it doesn't have to be food related. Even if you're working on eating healthy, your reward could be something totally not food related that you look forward to. Like I look forward to journaling or reading a book. So my reward, if I'm like, oh, I get to, you know, when I was setting up intermittent fasting to end at 6 p.m., I was like, oh, right after I get to make a yummy cup of tea, right? And I was like, it can be iced or it can be plain. I was super geeked about this cup of tea. I like fascinated over it. And I'm like, well, what would I like to do with this tea? And I was like, I would love to read a book in a quiet room. And that's something that has worked really well for me, because I love I attached it to something that I want to show up to do anyway. I'm going to show up and read or journal or go for a walk with an audiobook. So now that I know that I've attached a cup of tea, which kind of helps me to feel more full after you stop, sometimes after you're learning to fast, you make yourself hungry. You're like, I'm full, but I'm making myself hungry because I want to know that I can eat. And it's just so the habit can stick. So when you decide what habits you want to implement, what do you think, like, should you focus on all of them at the same time, or is one, do you like, is there?
Depends on your, like, every person's capacity to like either implement a new process. But I think the biggest thing is like also starting out incredibly small. They even talk about like, oh, if you want to floss more, like just start by flossing one tooth, because no one's going to actually stop after one tooth. Or if you want to read more, like just open your book up and read like a sentence, which is a really small goal, and most people could definitely do that. And once you get to that step, you'll more likely read more than just your sentence, but you've at least still accomplished your goal. So starting off really small with your goals. The Atomic Habits was such a funny book. He was talking about like getting ready for a half marathon or a 5K. He's like, literally this goal for like week 1 is just like put your running shoes on. Like that was it. Like I was like, what? And then the next one is like, put your running shoes on and stand outside your door. Like that's it. And then it was like, walk for just 1 minute and then you can come back. And it was just like funny how small and incremental the steps were. But once you do that the one step, you're like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. Like I might as well just go do a little more than this. I know, right? And it can be the opposite when we make these like massive goals. Our brains can't even comprehend like how we connect the dots to it. Some people can break down the steps quite easily and follow through, but for some people it can be really daunting. So convenience and making it small incremental steps so you don't get discouraged and then just give up completely.
Great advice. And it's super helpful. I'm not going to lie and say that, like, honestly, I know, like you said, it's ridiculous. I'm probably at least going to try to run as much as I can that day, but it does set the pattern for you. I think it's important to practice being successful, to practice finishing something, because that pattern of, yep, I did that, I showed up for myself, it actually builds so much confidence. So deciding if you're going to actually show up and just stop at the door, it's up to you. But the pattern of, I did what I said I'm going to do, it actually creates self-respect. Exactly. And you begin to trust. You trust yourself. You begin to say, I trust myself. I trust that I'm going to. Some days that I know I'm going to fail, I just say, hey, you're going to show up. You're going to fail today. And that, for some reason, is so rewarding for me, because the next day I'm like, you did what you said you were going to do. You knew you were going to fail yesterday, and you can get up today and win because you did what you said you're going to do. And I know that sounds really tricky. I'm not telling you to purposefully fail. But for me, just knowing that I'm keeping my word to myself is such a confidence booster, in that I'm applying a different lens to failure, because we're going to have days we fail.
Totally.
I mean, I fail at something every day. I usually just choose what it's going to be. I'm like, I'm going to fail at that today. Because this is the 20% that gives me the 80% of the results I'm looking for. And I really try to focus on.
All right, that's another episode in the books. Hello? I said it's over. Why are you still listening? Like, seriously, the episode is over. If you're still listening right now, you know what? You're probably a chronic procrastinator. Guess what? I'm still listening to you. Come on, for real, seriously. We gotta go do something productive. No, like, for real. No, for real. Okay. You can keep listening.